Hi, my name is Maria, and I'm 45 years old. I never imagined that the day I would have to fight for my place in my daughter's life would come so soon. It all started with a simple wedding invitation, one that would change everything. It wasn't an invitation at all, it was a rejection. Do not come to my wedding, you are not welcome. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. How did it come to this? I raised her, I loved her, I sacrificed for her, and yet here I was, shut out of the most important day of her life, betrayed by the one person I trusted most. And that wasn't all. What followed was even more shocking. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone you loved, if you've ever had your world flipped upside down by a person you trusted, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. This story is one of loss, but also one of redemption. It's about how I took back my power and reclaimed what was mine. A journey filled with heartbreak, revenge, and ultimately, justice. I thought I knew everything about my daughter. I was a mother who gave her heart and soul to raising my child. Every day I poured my love, guidance, and wisdom into her, believing that the bond we shared would last a lifetime. But as time passed, something began to shift. At first it was subtle, small changes that I brushed off as part of growing up, but deep inside, I could feel it. The distance between us was growing and I didn't know why. When she was young, we were inseparable. I remember long afternoons spent baking cookies together, helping her with school projects, and having heart-to-heart conversations late into the night. She would come to me with every problem, knowing that no matter what, I'd have her back. Those moments felt like the foundation of our relationship. I believed they always would be. But somewhere along the way, those precious moments began to fade. It started with small things, late nights, secrets she wouldn't share, and an ever-growing list of excuses when I asked her about her day. I told myself it was normal. She was becoming an adult, finding her independence. But then, things began to escalate. She stopped answering my calls. She stopped inviting me to events. At first, it seemed like typical teenage rebellion, something every parent goes through. But soon I realized it wasn't just a phase. It was something deeper, something I was too scared to acknowledge. There were times when I would sit by the phone, waiting for her to reach out. Times when I would stand in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, my mind wandering to all the memories we had shared. I longed for that connection again, but she wasn't there. She had become distant, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to break through the wall she had built around herself. But I convinced myself it was just growing pains. After all, every parent goes through these struggles, right? I kept telling myself that one day we would talk, and everything would go back to normal. I kept pushing away the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Something was more than just teenage angst. But when the wedding invitation arrived and I read the words that cut through me like a knife, I knew. I knew everything had changed, and not just in a way that could be fixed with a conversation. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a temporary phase. I was being pushed out of her life, and I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't prepared for the reality that my daughter, the one person I had loved with all my heart, had turned against me. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but I couldn't. Instead, I stood there in silence, my heart heavy with betrayal. I kept asking myself, what went wrong? Where did I fail? But the answer didn't come. Instead, I was left standing alone, with only the cold, harsh reality of her rejection staring back at me. This was the turning point, the moment I realized that everything I had built with her, everything I had sacrificed, was falling apart. But this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a much darker, more complicated journey. a journey that would force me to confront the painful truths about my family, my daughter, and ultimately myself. It didn't happen all at once. It was the little things that added up over time. Things that, at first, I brushed off as part of growing up or normal teenage rebellion. But when I look back now, I can see the signs clearly. I should have recognized them earlier. Maybe then I could have stopped it before it went too far. But at the time, I thought I was being paranoid. It started when she was about 17. She was still living at home, but she began spending more and more time away. At first, I was happy for her. She was finding her own path, meeting new people, becoming more independent. But as the days passed, it became clear that her independence came at a cost. She stopped telling me where she was going. I would ask, and she'd give me short answers or tell me she was with friends, but something in her voice didn't sit right with me. Then came the late nights. I would stay up waiting for her to come home, wondering what she was doing, who she was with. It wasn't just the time she spent away, it was the way she seemed to shut me out when she came home. It was as if there was a wall between us that I couldn't break down. I remember one night, I was sitting in the living room, and I could hear her on the phone in her room. I could only catch bits of the conversation, but I heard enough to know it wasn't just casual chatter. She was talking about things she never mentioned to me before. Her voice was low, guarded. I didn't think much of it at the time. She was growing up, after all. But the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. Then there were the lies. Small ones, at first. I'd ask her where she had been, and she'd tell me she had been with her friends. But when I asked her for more details, the story didn't quite add up. She would get defensive. Or worse, she'd avoid the conversation altogether. She wasn't the same girl who used to share everything with me. It was as though she was becoming a stranger. There was one instance I'll never forget. I had asked her about a new friend she'd been spending a lot of time with. She brushed me off, saying it was nothing important. But when I pressed her, she snapped at me. Her anger was unlike anything I had seen before. It wasn't just frustration. It was like a switch had been flipped. It was as if she was hiding something from me, and I could feel it in every fiber of my being. She didn't even try to explain. Instead, she just walked away, leaving me standing there, confused and hurt. I tried to give her space. I didn't want to push her too hard, not wanting to intrude on her growing independence. But the more I backed off, the more she pulled away. It was as if every attempt I made to connect with her was met with resistance. I tried talking to her, asking how she was feeling, what was going on in her life, but her answers were always vague, disconnected. It was like I wasn't really talking to my daughter anymore. And then, one day, it hit me. This wasn't just a phase. This wasn't just teenage rebellion. I realized that my daughter was hiding something from me, something big. And the more I tried to reach out, the further she pulled away. But what I didn't realize, what I didn't see coming, was that her lies and her distance were only the beginning. The truth would hit me like a freight train when I least expected it. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. But this didn't start yesterday. It didn't even start a few months ago. No, this all began 2 years ago, when I first noticed the subtle shift. At first, I chalked it up to growing pains. She was becoming an adult, finding her own way in the world, stepping out from under my wing. I remember thinking, maybe this is just a phase. Every parent goes through it, right? We've all experienced that moment when our child becomes more independent, less willing to share their lives with us. I didn't see the warning signs, not in the way I should have. I remember one evening, about 2 years ago, sitting at the dinner table, watching her eat in silence. She used to talk nonstop about her day, her friends, her classes, the things that excited her. But on this night, there was nothing. Just the clinking of her fork against the plate and the occasional glance at her phone. I tried to start a conversation, but she barely responded. I told myself it was just a rough day, that she was tired, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. A few weeks later, the pattern continued. She would leave early in the morning, not telling me where she was going. She'd come home late, sometimes without a word. And when I asked her about her day, she'd give me the same vague answers. At first, I didn't push her. After all, she was becoming an adult and I needed to respect her privacy. But the more I backed off, the more distant she became. Then came the first real sign that something was off. It was a Sunday afternoon and I had just finished making dinner. I called her down to eat, but she didn't respond. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, I saw her standing there, her face pale, her eyes red as if she had been crying. I asked her if she was okay, but she just nodded and said, "I'm fine." I wasn't convinced, but what could I say? She was becoming her own person. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. I pushed it down, told myself it was just her teenage years coming to an end. She was figuring things out, and that was normal, right? But as time went on, the signs became harder to ignore. And when the wedding invitation came, when I read the words that would shatter my world, I knew then that everything had been building up to this moment. All the lies, the secrets, the distance, it was all leading to this one painful truth. The daughter I had raised, the one I thought I knew inside and out, had already made up her mind. She'd already decided I wasn't part of her future. And I realized I had missed the warning signs, the subtle changes, the odd behaviors, the way she pulled away. Those weren't just signs of growing up. They were signs of something much darker, something I couldn't have prepared for. It wasn't just about the wedding. It wasn't just about me being excluded from the most important day in my daughter's life. There was more at play here, a much deeper issue, something that would come to light only after everything had spiraled out of control. The wedding was only the beginning, and what followed would bring to the surface something I had always kept close to my heart, something that had the power to turn everything upside down. The one thing I had always been proud of, the one thing I had worked my entire life to protect, was our beach house. It wasn't just property, it was history, a symbol of everything our family had gone through and built together. It had been passed down through generations, a place where memories were made, where laughter filled the air, and where we all felt at peace. It was my sanctuary, and I had promised myself that one day I would pass it down to my children, just as it had been passed down to me. But when the invitation arrived, and I found myself pushed to the sidelines of my daughter's life, I began to see things differently. That beach house wasn't just a family treasure. It was a symbol of everything I had worked so hard to protect. And now I realized it was at risk of being lost, not just to my daughter, but to everything I believed in. I didn't know it at the time, but my daughter's motives went deeper than just the wedding. As the months went on, I started to notice something troubling. She was spending more time with her fiancé's family, who seemed to have an interest in the beach house. They would make casual comments whenever they came over, mentioning how beautiful the house was, how it would be such a great place for a honeymoon. And then it happened. The request came, hidden behind the veil of family tradition and making memories. It was subtle at first. She asked if we could use the beach house for their honeymoon. She said it was only right, considering how much they had both grown up around it. At first, I was caught off guard, and I thought maybe she was just being sentimental, trying to make the best of a difficult situation. But then, I began to realize that this wasn't a simple request. This wasn't about the honeymoon. This was about something more, a plan to take what was mine and make it theirs. When I began to dig deeper, when I began to connect the dots, the truth became clearer. The beach house wasn't just a cherished family heirloom to my daughter. It was an asset. It was a means to an end, a way to solidify her new life, to secure her future with the man she had chosen. I had spent my entire life protecting it, guarding it with everything I had. But in the end, it was more than just a house. It was a symbol of my own failure, a symbol of what I had lost and what I would never get back. I never imagined I would have to fight for it. I never imagined that the place that held my most cherished memories would become a battleground for my daughter's future. But here I was, standing at the edge of losing everything I had worked for, and all I could think was, how had I not seen this coming? How had I let my guard down so completely? The wedding was just the beginning, but it wasn't the only thing that would test me. The beach house, my sanctuary, was now a pawn in a game I never agreed to play. And as much as I wanted to let go, as much as I wanted to walk away, I knew deep down that I couldn't. I wouldn't. Not when everything I had worked for was on the line. The anger simmered inside me like a slow burn. At first, I wasn't sure how to respond. I felt betrayed, yes, but more than that, I felt powerless. The family I had sacrificed so much for, the daughter I had given everything to, was now asking me to give away the one thing that mattered most to me. The beach house was more than just a place. It was a part of me. It was where my family's history lived, where my own memories were made, and now it was slipping through my fingers. But I had one thing left, my voice, and I was not going to let this happen without a fight. I started small. I reached out to my lawyer, not sure if I needed to take legal action or if I just needed to understand my options. But as I spoke to him, I realized that the stakes were much higher than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just about a family squabble. This was about protecting what was mine, about standing up for the years of hard work and sacrifice I had made to create a life I could be proud of. At first, I considered letting it go. After all, I loved my daughter. She was my flesh and blood. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that if I gave in now, if I let them take what was mine without standing up for myself, it would set a precedent that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I couldn't let her think she could manipulate me, that she could take whatever she wanted without consequences. So I did what I had to do. I fought back. I hired a lawyer, and we began the process of securing the beach house. It wasn't just about the house. It was about respect. It was about showing my daughter that no matter how far she went, no matter what she tried to take from me, I would stand my ground. I wouldn't let her tear apart the very fabric of our family just because she had the power to ask for it. The legal battle was long, exhausting, and emotionally draining. There were moments when I thought I might lose everything. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have doubts. There were times when I questioned whether fighting for the beach house was worth the emotional cost, especially when it felt like I was losing my daughter in the process. But in the end, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my dignity, my integrity, and my right to be respected. Months went by. The tension between my daughter and me grew, and the relationship became strained beyond repair. She didn't understand why I was making such a big deal out of it. To her, it was just a house. But to me, it was everything. Every time we spoke, it felt like a battle, like we were two strangers who could no longer understand each other. She demanded the house, and I refused. It became a war of wills. Then, one day, the verdict came. The judge ruled in my favor. The beach house remained mine. I had won. Not just the property, but my sense of self. My right to stand up for what was mine, even if it meant going against my own flesh and blood. but the victory didn't feel as sweet as I had imagined. In the end, it wasn't about the house. It was about something deeper, something I had lost along the way. The bond between my daughter and me had been broken beyond repair, and that was the hardest part of all. I had won the battle, but I had lost something far more precious in the process, my relationship with her. As I stood there holding the court papers in my hands, a sense of emptiness washed over me. The battle had cost me more than I was willing to admit, but I couldn't change what had happened. The truth was, this wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about survival. I had fought for my dignity, my future, and now I could finally breathe. But I also knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I had won, but the price was higher than I ever imagined. The days following the court's ruling were some of the hardest of my life. The tension between my daughter and me was palpable. Every conversation felt like a battlefield, every word a weapon. She couldn't understand why I had fought so hard for something she saw as insignificant, and I couldn't understand why she thought it was acceptable to tear apart everything we had worked for. The conversations were few, but when they did happen, they were explosive. I remember the first time we spoke after the court case was settled. It was a Saturday morning, and I had just returned from the lawyer's office. My hands still shook from the legal documents, and my heart ached from the emotional toll of the last few months. I sat at the kitchen table trying to gather myself when she walked in, her eyes red from crying. She looked at me, and the silence between us was unbearable. Finally, she spoke. "Why, Mom? Why did you do this? You know I needed that house. It was supposed to be mine. Why couldn't you just let me have it?" Her voice cracked, but the anger in her eyes was unmistakable. She stood there, demanding an explanation for something she didn't want to understand. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before I replied. "It wasn't just about the house, sweetheart. It was about respect. It was about you understanding that I won't just hand everything over because you ask for it. I worked my entire life to build this. This house, it means something to me." She shook her head, as if the words I spoke couldn't reach her. "But it's just a house, Mom. Why are you making this so complicated? Why are you punishing me?" I could see the hurt in her eyes, but I also saw the selfishness, the entitlement. I had raised her to be strong, independent, but somewhere along the way, that strength had turned into something dangerous, something that only cared about its own desires. "Because," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, "you've forgotten that family comes before everything else. You wanted that house for yourself, but you didn't even think about what it meant to me. You didn't think about what it would cost us." She stepped back, her shoulders slumping, as if the weight of my words finally hit her. There was a moment of silence, the kind that speaks louder than any argument. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know who you are anymore, Mom. You're not the person I thought you were. You've changed. You don't even care about me." Those words hit harder than any blow I had ever received. They weren't just accusations. They were a confession of how far we had drifted. She saw me as the enemy now, as the one who had stolen her happiness, her future. And in a way, she was right. Everything had changed. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to look her in the eye. "I do care about you, but I can't keep enabling your demands. I can't keep sacrificing everything I have for someone who won't even try to understand." She didn't reply. She just turned and walked out, the door slamming behind her, leaving me standing in the kitchen, my heart aching for the daughter I had lost. Later that night, I sat in the living room, the weight of the day settling on my shoulders. The arguments, the harsh words, the unspoken resentment, it was all too much. But there was nothing I could do to undo it. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. We had both drawn lines in the sand, and there was no crossing them now. I didn't know where this would end or if it would ever be the same, but what I did know was this. I had fought for my dignity. I had fought for the one thing I had left. And in the process, I had lost something I never thought I would. The woman who had once been my daughter. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. Grief, anger, confusion, and at times, a fleeting sense of hope. I couldn't seem to find any peace no matter how hard I tried. There were moments when I would find myself sitting in the living room, staring at the empty space where my daughter once sat beside me. The silence felt deafening. I would hear her voice in my head, replaying the things she had said to me, the way she had made me feel so small, so insignificant. But there were also times when I felt a strange sense of relief, a relief that I had finally stood up for myself, that I had made a choice that was mine, not one made out of guilt or obligation. The anger came in waves. There were nights when I would lie awake, thinking about everything that had happened, wishing I could turn back time. I regretted the things I said, the things I didn't say, but I also knew that some things were beyond repair. What had happened between my daughter and me was something I couldn't undo. The pain of it settled deep in my chest, a heavy weight that I could never fully lift. It was the price of standing up for what I believed in. But there were also moments of clarity, brief glimpses of understanding. I began to realize that no matter how much I had lost, I hadn't lost everything. The house, the property, all of it was mine, yes. But what really mattered was the sense of self I had regained. I had fought for my dignity, my respect, and in doing so, I had rediscovered my own strength. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about me. I wasn't the woman I used to be. I was stronger now. I had been broken, yes, but I had also been rebuilt. But it wasn't all triumph. There were moments when I would break down in tears, wondering if I had done the right thing. I questioned everything, the choices I had made, the way I had handled things. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe I should have been more understanding, more forgiving. But every time I questioned myself, I came back to the same truth. I had fought for what was mine. And I couldn't regret that. The hardest part, though, was the silence. The distance between me and my daughter was something I couldn't ignore. It was a chasm that seemed to grow wider every day. And while I tried to reach out, tried to bridge the gap, I knew deep down that the damage had already been done. There were times when I would see a picture of her on social media, laughing, smiling, living her life without me. It stung. But I had to remind myself that this was her choice, not mine. I had done everything I could to be there for her, but I couldn't force her to want me in her life. All I could do was keep moving forward. One day, I sat by the window, watching the sun set over the ocean. The beach house was quiet, peaceful, the way it always had been. I thought about all the memories I had made there. Times with my daughter, with my family, and I realized that no matter what happened, those memories were mine to keep. No one could take them away from me. I didn't know where my relationship with my daughter would go from here. I didn't know if we would ever find our way back to each other. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The battle had been long, and it had cost me more than I had imagined. But I had survived it. And that was something to be proud of. The following weeks were a blur of quiet mornings and long, lonely nights. The world outside seemed to move on, indifferent to my pain, but inside the beach house, time stood still. Every corner of that place, every piece of furniture seemed to carry the weight of my memories. The wooden floors creaked under my feet as I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The scent of the ocean, the salty breeze that came in through the windows, reminded me of all the summers I had spent here, of the laughter, the conversations, the moments shared with the people I loved most. I remember one evening as I sat in the living room, the soft glow of the setting sun filtering through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The light was golden, warm, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. I ran my fingers along the edge of the coffee table, feeling the smooth wood beneath my touch. It was a small moment, but it brought a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in weeks. The sound of the ocean waves crashing against the shore reached my ears, a constant reminder of the beauty and serenity that surrounded me. It was as though the world outside was continuing its rhythm, unaffected by the chaos inside my heart. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the waves wash over me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my emotions begin to lift. But then, the silence returned. I turned my gaze toward the empty armchair where my daughter used to sit, and my heart clenched. There was an emptiness in the room, a space that was once filled with laughter and conversation. I longed to fill it again, but I knew that wouldn't happen anytime soon. The space had been occupied by something far more painful: betrayal, loss, and a shattered relationship. I walked over to the window and looked out at the horizon. The sun was just beginning to dip below the water, painting the sky in shades of pink, orange, and purple. It was beautiful, almost surreal. But even as I watched, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed, that the life I once knew was slipping away, piece by piece. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my daughter, I was mourning the loss of who I had been, the mother, the protector, the one who could make everything right. I sat down on the couch, my hands resting in my lap. The cushion beneath me was worn, just like the memories that lingered in this house. I glanced at the family photos on the wall, the ones of us on family vacations, birthdays, holidays. We were so happy then. How had it all fallen apart so quickly? But as I sat there, I realized something. The house was still here. It was still mine, still a place of refuge, still a part of me. The memories may have been bittersweet now, but they were mine to keep. And in that moment, I understood that while I may have lost my daughter, I had not lost everything. I still had the strength to stand on my own, to move forward, to rebuild what had been broken. The night grew darker, and the room was lit only by the soft glow of a lamp in the corner. The silence was almost suffocating, but I embraced it. It was my time to reflect, to come to terms with what had happened, and to accept that the journey wasn't over yet. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. The beach house, with all its memories, had become my refuge. It had withstood the storm, and so had I. As I sat there in the quiet, dimly lit living room, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. The pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal. It was all still fresh in my mind. But amid all the chaos, there was one thing I had learned. I had learned that no matter how much you love someone, you can't let them take everything from you. You can't let them manipulate you into giving up your dignity, your self-respect, or the things that mean the most to you. In the end, I realized that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's about recognizing your worth and setting boundaries, even when the people you love most don't understand. I had spent so many years thinking I had to be everything to everyone, especially to my daughter. I had believed that if I just kept giving, kept sacrificing, it would be enough. But it wasn't. I had lost myself in the process. Now I know I have to put myself first. I have to fight for what's mine. Not just the beach house, but my peace, my self-worth, my future. It's not easy, and it's not without sacrifice. But this journey, this painful, emotional roller coaster, has taught me that I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. The relationship with my daughter may never be the same. I don't know if she'll ever understand why I fought so hard, why I didn't give in. I don't know if we'll ever repair what's been broken, but I do know this. I did what I had to do. I stood up for myself, and that's something I can be proud of. So if you're watching this and you've ever been in a situation where you felt like you were being used, where someone you loved was taking advantage of your kindness, I want you to know you are not alone. You have the right to stand up for yourself. You have the right to say no, to draw a line, and to fight for what is yours. It's not easy, and it's not always popular, but it's necessary. If you've ever fought for your own dignity, for your own peace, share your story in the comments. Let's support each other, because the truth is, no matter how hard it gets, we all have the strength to keep going. If you found strength in your own struggles, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves, but they are the ones that teach us the most. Thank you for watching, and remember, your story is not over. The power to reclaim your life is always in your hands.